Now, there's something else they did during the Berlin Conference. Because remember, after they had traveled around the continent, found some of the most powerful kingdoms with well-established educational and religious systems. I mean, the African people are just resilient. When you get to know the Africans, you understand the African spirit. And they knew that if they continued the same way they were going, they would never defeat the Africans. So they set in place a system of colonization and making the Africans believe that everything that was African was bad and everything that was European, particularly British and English, was better. So the seed of divide and conquer was also sown during the Berlin Conference. And they knew, just give it a generation or less, these people, not only are they going to be so divided, because they chopped us up into these small economies that really could never survive on their own. You take a country like Equatorial Guinea, Central African Republic, Malawi, Rwanda, Burundi, they're economies that even if they struggle and begin to do better on their own, if the master decides you're becoming too smart, they're very easy to destabilize.
Wow.
And that's exactly what has been going on in our Africa. So Berlin Conference, people don't realize it was designed to see to it that the Africans are forever defeated. So for those who turn around and say, but Ambassador, don't talk about the Berlin Conference, it was a long time ago. And I'll say, as long as we have a country called Malawi, a country called Zimbabwe, a country called Central African Republic, all the African countries really for that matter, Berlin Conference is alive and well. Because that which they set out to do 123, 24 years ago, it's still in place. Nothing has changed. So how can they say Berlin Conference is a thing of history, don't talk about it? No, what's really sad and what should disgust the world is to say this policy was put in place 123 years ago and it is still in place and nothing has changed. Is when you look at what France did to the Francophone countries in 1958, when they were living, quote unquote, leaving the continent, they gave the Francophone countries two choices. You can be independent with some affiliations to France, or you can be independent with no affiliations to France. Well, Guinea and Mali said, we are done with you, France, goodbye, leave us alone. That's how we had the first ever known union of any African states. They went into those two countries, took everything that they thought they had brought to them. History tells us they even took the last cup, teaspoon, chair, and proceeded to pour concrete into the sewage pipes, completely devastating the two economies, simply because they refused to be affiliated to France. But what they, and also the Sékou Touré, then president of Guinea at that time, he looked at the pact that France was making the Francophone countries sign. It was called the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. He refused to sign it.
How many countries in Africa?
Now we are sitting at 14 Francophone countries that are still held on to this pact.
So in the 50-some countries in Africa altogether, were they all colonized?
Yes.
By different
countries?
Different countries.
The majority of the countries went to France,
yes,
Britain. We have Portuguese, we have Spanish, and those are the main ones.
You used the word looting before.
Yes.
The looting continues to this day?
To this day, it continues, but it has a different name.
So tell me what the name is.
Well, the exploitation of Africa continues. Again, let me go back to the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, which is the biggest one. The Francophone countries were told because we brought you the idea that you can sit at a table and eat with a fork and knife, we brought you tea, we built some roads and told you about going to school, we're going to call that colonial debt. So there's a fee for that and you need to pay for it. They were also told that you must speak French as your official language, and it must be your language of instruction in schools, and we will be the one to design your educational system. And then also, your money, 85% of your bank reserves, you will keep them, you'll deposit them with the French bank, and we will take that money and invest it in the French stock market, but we don't have to tell you what the returns are on your money. So collectively, all the Francophone countries that signed that pact, their funds, the 85% of their bank reserves, are invested under French name.
Got to hold that because we're getting behind on a little break. We are talking with.
You know, Africans around the world have been condemning Tinubu-led ECOWAS leadership to attack Niger Republic. People have said that why will Africa continue to protect the interests of the Western world when the Western world have never in any way protected the interests of Africa? All the Western world can do in Africa is to exploit, loot whatever they can and take it back to the Western world. At the end of the day, they will come with a support package just to give you a token from what you own by yourself. Even some Africans are beginning to say that these leaders that we are electing are just a puppet for the Western world. They continue to bring their African down in order to continue to hide money in the Western world without any consequence. And some of these people, they will not keep their family in this dangerous area. But they continue to aid the Western world to continue to oppress their own people and make sure they get away with it. This is something that all Africa around the world have said we don't want. And a lot of people have come out to speak about it. That's what our sister, Doctor, who have been advocating this for long, spoken about now. And we have to listen to what she said about this.
The writing has been on the wall for a long time when it comes to France. It was just a matter of time. What's happening now in Africa is a revolution similar to what saw the demise of the mighty Roman Empire, a revolution similar to what we saw with the fall of the mighty British Empire. There is no way that the West would have continued to exploit and plunder African natural resources, abuse the Africans for as long as they have. The end is here. And I hope France does see the writing on the wall. This is just the beginning of the African Revolution, and it is not going to stop.
We all know that most of these colonial nations, British and France, what they call Portuguese, Belgium. You know what Belgium did in Congo. We know what Netherlands did. We know what America have done so far. We know most of these colonial masters have gotten away with a lot of things in Africa without any consequence. And that they will continue to enjoy. We African, we are allowing them to enjoy those things without minding our own side. You see, this is something that we all have to speak out. And she have said it that, these people, they keep getting away with this thing without no consequence. So they believe that they can come to Africa and exploit Africa with ease. It's time for Africa to not to only ask these people to leave the country, it's also to ask them to return back what they have stolen in Africa. They have done so many damage in Africa, and it's time for Africa to wake up. Nobody's against Western businesses. Nobody's against Western investment. Nobody's against even Western to have a citizen in Africa. But what we are against is exploitation. Let everything go according to law. Let everyone benefit. Both the indigenous and the Western benefit. Not you to exploit the people and go in your area and rather these people is corrupt and they are criminals. But you that is criminal becomes the good one. Now they ask you to leave. Criminals ask you to leave their place. Why can't you leave the criminal place and go your own way? So because you don't want to do anything with criminal. But we see the people that are criminal, and that's what she's saying now. She's calling it out now. Listen to what she said now. She's really calling it out. So serious.
I think that France has gotten away with a lot over the years, and it's not just France, most of the Western powers for that matter. But I would hope that they would see that what's happening in Niger and what has happened in the other countries in West Africa is a very significant movement that I hope the West will look at it and consider it very seriously in terms of their policies on Africa, their foreign policies on Africa. What they have done in the past is simply not going to work anymore.
This does present for Africa now is an opportunity to begin to renegotiate its trade policies, its economic policies, with these Western powers to get these resources to feed their factories and their manufacturing concerns at the expense of Africans. We have been impoverished for so long, and this has gone on for too long. Child has grown up to be a man, and he now knows his father's inheritance. That is where we are at the moment, and it is time for Africans to demand for their inheritance and what rightfully belongs to them. And how is this going to happen? It will now be on our own terms. You know, as what is happening, now we begin to look and say to ourselves, who are our real friends? You want our resources? Let's talk. It has to be on our own terms. And I'm hoping that this is sustained.
I see what's happening in Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Guinea very differently. If you look at the previous coups, those were orchestrated by Western powers, majority, of course, orchestrated by France. They had their own intentions, in a few quite documented very well. The leaders were trying to do what was ultimately best for their people, and those leaders were assassinated. The difference between these coups are coups being led by our people. The people have spoken. The people now truly understand the issues. The people are standing up to say what has been going on is unfair, is unacceptable. It really just simply makes sense that something has got to give. There is a difference between the previous coups and these last 4 coups, especially the one in Niger. I actually, on a personal level, I feel uncomfortable even calling them coups. This is you look at a situation where people are basically desperate, where they know they're rich in natural resources, and yet the majority of the people are extremely poor. How long can that situation be sustained before the people finally wake up and rise up? That is what's happening. And I would like to call what's happening in these 4 countries as an ideological realignment of their economic, of their political, of their social values. At some point, if you look at the situation with the former French colonies, before even a president comes to power, there are certain no-go areas that the president must not touch, because if you do, you may not live to see the end of the day. Areas like the military, areas like, of course, the finances and the reserves that must be deposited with the French treasury, areas of the natural resources. So if you are a president, an African president, who is coming to power, and you are told, as long as you stay away from discussions pertaining to their presence, military presence in the country, training of your military by France, equipping of your military by France, don't talk about the natural resources, whose the French companies have the first right of approval. Do not talk, and make sure you continue to deposit your bank reserves with the French central bank. If you avoid those areas, then you're free to run your country any which way you want. Now, what kind of a leader is that? What environment are you going to be occupying and managing and running your country with all those major areas of economic development no longer accessible to you? The whole thing is so mind-boggling that we have gone to, over so many years, this is 2023, that the leaders in Africa have been unable to undo the agreements that were put in place when the African countries were given their independence. It is unbelievable that to this day, you can have a country like Niger to be the 2nd poorest country in the world, and yet all their resources are going to France. Most of Niger is not electrified, while their uranium is electrifying France and Europe. You can take one after the other after the other. At every level, it's unfair, it's unacceptable, and I don't even know how the Western powers could really go to sleep every day knowing of the carnage that the havoc they're creating in Africa, and hope that this will go on forever. The time has come. The children of Africa are now awoken. They can see clearly now, and they're simply standing up and saying, enough is enough. So yes, we don't like coups. But the last 4 coups are very different in the sense that the children of Africa are very clear because they are the ones standing up and saying, we got to take back our country. We need to defend our turf. What's right is right. What is wrong is wrong. We can no longer continue to be exploited. That's what makes this different. It's not influenced by France. The coups are not influenced by any nation. It's simply people standing back and saying, we're taking back what belongs to us. And that's what makes these coups different. And I'm uncomfortable calling them coups. I'm calling them instead ideological realignment of our economic, political, and social values. The children have risen, and the children are speaking, and the citizens themselves are backing those who have led the uprising. And it is a warning to the Western powers that the African Revolution has begun, and those who are going to align themselves with the people are those who are going to survive the revolution that's taking place in Africa. The same is true with the African leaders as well. Those who will align themselves with the wishes of the people are the ones who are going to survive this revolution as well. I do believe the African Revolution has begun, and those who cannot see the writing on the wall, they will not survive this revolution. There is no turning back. The children of Africa are rising. The children of Africa understand the issues, and this time they're going to the streets, not along party lines. They're going to the streets united as citizens of Niger, as citizens of Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, because they understand that this particular fight has got to be dealt with from a national level, and I hope with time it'll be dealt with from a continental level, because the exploitation of the continent has got to stop. And this time it is the children of Africa who are speaking, and the world better listen up. I don't think it's a good option. And I would want to ask the same people who are sitting at the table having those discussions about having a military intervention in Niger. Let me remind you that there are other coups that we are not talking about, that we should be talking about. By France forcing Niger to send all its natural resources to France, that's a coup. By France having its own military in Niger and forcing Nigerians that you can only be trained by France, that is a coup. By forcing Niger to deposit 50% of its reserves with France, that is a coup. The question I have for those who are sitting on the table, during those ECOWAS meetings, during those AU peace and security meetings, what have you done about those coups? Take those 3 coups, multiply by 14, because that's what's happening in the 14 former French colonies. Those are deadly coups that have been taking place for decades. And you, ECOWAS, have done nothing about those coups. I need them to also answer and give us remedy as to how they are going to handle those coups. Make no mistake about it. Those are coups against the African citizens in those countries. And while they discuss what they would like to do with Niger, I would also want them to table those coups and come up with a solution as to what needs to be done. Because behind those coups that I just described from France, there are millions of children who are dying from starvation. There are millions of children who are going to bed with an empty stomach. There are millions of African youth who are unemployed. There are millions of women who are dying while giving birth to another life. I need them to put that on the table as well. If their interests are truly about the Africans, let's look at the global view of the issue. Let's have a bird's eye view of the issue and have a frank and fair and honest discussion about what is really going on in Africa. I do know that I don't think the carnage that's going on in Africa is what ECOWAS is all about. Leadership is about the people. It's about creating a better life for the people. But if you're going to allow one who has committed egregious crimes in Africa continues to have coups, those are coups. Let's call a spade a spade. You can't give France a pass. So also let us know what you intend to do about those ongoing economic and political coups that are being imposed on those 14 French countries, former French colonies, by France. So to just talk about what's happening in Niger alone, in isolation, and not go to the root causes of the genesis of why what's happening is happening, simply does not make any sense. And I would hope military intervention in Niger is not an option. That simply is not something we should do as Africans. There are better ways of dealing with our issues. Our elders must come together. Our elders must have a frank conversation, and let's look at what is ultimately best for the people, not only the people in Niger, but in all former French colonies and ultimately in all African countries, because this moment is calling for unity, meaningful unity of purpose among the African leaders to simply say, guys, this can no longer continue. It simply cannot continue. The people have spoken, and I hope our leadership would listen.